Assassin's Creed will surely go down as one of the most acclaimed and varied video game franchises of all time. With 11 games to the series' name and a 12th on the way later this year, there really is something for everybody to like. Whether that's the Third Crusade, the Italian Renaissance, the American Revolution, the Golden Age of Piracy, the Seven Years' War, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, ancient Egypt, or ancient Greece. Yes, Greece, not Rome. About 30 of you corrected me last time because I said it was ancient Rome in the last ranking video, so I'm really sorry about that. It was an honest mistake. But getting back to the point, Assassin's Creed has gone on to many wonderful time periods, and with a Viking setting on the way this year, and my last ranking list being extremely dated, I've decided to re-rank all of the existing 11 games that you can already purchase in stores today. Well, I mean, not in actual stores right now for obvious reasons, but you know what I mean. I've replayed almost all of the games since I made my last list, knowing that my opinion was likely to change. Some of my opinions on games have changed a lot, and some have stayed exactly the same. Just as a heads up, if I wasn't clear last time, this list will not feature any of the comics, Chronicles games, DLCs, or the awful movie. This is just about the main 11 Assassin's Creed games. With that out of the way, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to my official re-ranking of all of the Assassin's Creed games from worst to best. Spoiler warning, you've been warned. So at number 11, I have Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Oh boy, so I just know that this video is going to get a lot more dislikes than the last video did, because you guys were really mad at me last time for putting Odyssey so low, and now it's even lower. But there's a few things I need to say before you start hating on me, so please be reasonable and listen. First of all, my opinion on these games doesn't have to affect yours. If Odyssey is your favorite, then that's totally fine, guys. I mean, I don't actively hate any of these games. And two, the reason I'm putting this at the bottom is frankly because the game just doesn't fit. What I mean by that is this game just doesn't feel like an Assassin's Creed game. And this is largely due to the fact that this game takes place before Origins. Yes, I said before Origins, as in, there's no assassins in an Assassin's Creed game, go figure. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm Hellenistic, and I love seeing stories from my religion being brought to such a vibrant platform. In fact, this whole game is made extremely well. Sailing is back and better than ever, the graphics are undeniably the best they've ever been in the series so far, and combat is even more fun than Origins. And the setting is so beautiful and everything you could hope for from a game set in ancient Greece. However, this doesn't stop the game from not really fitting into the established formula. This game definitely feels like it was never meant to be an Assassin's Creed game, but they got cold feet on this game standing on its own, so they added elements from AC and called it an AC game. People told me in the comments last time that I shouldn't rank this game so low just because it doesn't fit the overarching story very well. But that in of itself doesn't make sense. How can I put a game like that any higher? I've been playing all these games since the first one came out, so of course the story matters to me. Not to mention, I'm not a fan of choosing my own dialogue. It really works well in Elder Scrolls, but it just really doesn't work in Assassin's Creed. In AC, the best protagonists already have their stories written for them, which makes it easier to sympathize with them on their journey. I totally understand why Ubisoft wanted to try this style of dialogue. They wanted people to have different experiences in order to increase the likelihood of people replaying the game. But it's just not for me personally. I don't consider this game a proper Assassin's Creed game, and I really wish it had been the beginning of a new franchise instead. Shackling it to a series this long was a mistake in my opinion, and they would have been better off giving Bayek a sequel like everybody wanted. As it stands, Odyssey is a great game. It's very well made, but it's just not a great Assassin's Creed game. Thus, I really have no choice but to put it on the bottom. So at number 10 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed 1, the game that started it all. Now, somebody in the comments of the last video pointed out to me that he doesn't really understand why Assassin's Creed 1 doesn't always make it to the bottom of people's lists. And since I've replayed it, I kinda understand why he said that. Honestly, if it wasn't for Odyssey not fitting the series, it would be at the bottom. AC1 is an important game, don't get me wrong, and it's important for the series, both for me and the franchise as a whole. With no AC1, there wouldn't be any Assassin's Creed. So I'll give credit where it's due that this game should be cherished for its historical value, but it doesn't stop the game from being pretty dated, I'm not gonna lie. This game, for one thing, has no subtitles, which for people like me who have to wear hearing aids, this game is pretty annoying to begin with. However, not mentioning that, this game also has no nighttime, which makes the game feel like it never ends. The angles for the cutscenes are atrocious, as is the majority of the voice acting, especially Altair's. Altair is a really unlikable protagonist for the majority of the game, and it's not helped by his blatantly American accent, and that's despite the fact that this game takes place during the Third Crusade, centuries before Europeans even discovered America. Then there's the fact that the mission structure is repetitive and not fun to replay, and exploration is basically limited to 3 cities with boring cliffsides in between, and guards that will attack you just for riding your horse too fast. I mean, seriously, they're gonna attack me just because I rode my horse a little fast? Imagine if police officers did that. Not to mention, this game just takes a really long time to get going due to the tutorial and all the exposition. The assassination missions are spectacular, however, some of the finest in the entire series, and they're only hampered by the lack of subtitles. The combat is definitely weaker as well in this game, and the setting is so devoid of color that it becomes almost nauseating to look at after a while. But I can see why this game did have a good story overall, even if it was a little too safe in my opinion. The modern day stuff is arguably at some of its most intriguing since this is all still brand new to us. I can excuse this game for its flaws since this was the very beginning and Ubisoft didn't know if a sequel was actually going to happen or not. You gotta understand, this game was a spin-off of Prince of Persia. It would have been an easy failure. But luckily, it was not a failure. But what I can't forgive is the fact that somehow Ubisoft has gone this long without remastering this game. Seriously guys, it's been 13 years, get a move on. This game needs to be remade from scratch in my opinion. Everything needs to be changed. I honestly think a remastered Assassin's Creed 1 would make a lot of money. As it stands, the original is great for historical value, but I have a really hard time finding much else to enjoy with this one. So at number 9 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Syndicate is a game a lot of people told me I was wrong about last time, and after replaying it, no, I'm sorry, I really still think that this game sucks. No, don't get me wrong, just like with Odyssey, this is a very good looking game. The setting was clearly given a lot of love by the developers, however, this is admittedly a personal thing exclusive to me, but I always found the Industrial Revolution really boring. I've never really been into mechanics and machinery, so this setting has always been a bit of a snooze fest for me, personally. But not mentioning that, the combat is way too cartoony and over the top. The navigation is split between a really rickety and annoying carriage system and a grappling hook that honestly takes the fun out of climbing. It has a really forgettable villain who we somehow got cutscenes for by himself when neither protagonists were around. That's not how the Animus works, guys. And finally, the main characters are both just not very good in my opinion. Jacob Frye is too full of himself and it doesn't really feel like he cares about the Assassin Brotherhood. He also feels like a bit of a troll towards the longtime fans of the franchise. Meanwhile, his sister Evie is definitely better, but she's also a little too boring in my opinion. The fact that she's already basically an established assassin kind of robs her character of much relatability or intrigue. The Liberation missions also get old really quickly, and it feels like a poor man's Rome from Brotherhood. If they were trying to make people forget about the disaster of Unity's launch, Syndicate was definitely not the way to go in my opinion. Also, the decision to directly continue the non-existent modern-day plot from the last game was a big mistake in my opinion, as people really wanted something completely new by this point, and would have to wait another 2 years to get it. As it stands, I still don't like this game, and I definitely don't want to play it again. It's not the worst game ever made, but I found it really bland and unmemorable, even upon replay. I know it has its fans, but I'm just not one of them guys. I'm really sorry. So at number 8 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed Revelations. Just like last time, it really crushes me to put this one so low considering it's the conclusion to the epic Ezio trilogy, and it even gives Altair a fitting conclusion along the way. But man, this game is just really forgettable. The setting, just like with Syndicate, is one I'm just not personally a fan of. Admittedly, I know very little about Istanbul, but what I do know from this game is that it was really drained of color and kind of boring. You can rebuild sections of the city, but it's identical to Roman Brotherhood, but without any of the same satisfaction, unfortunately. The villain of this game is easily the most forgettable in the entire franchise, and I honestly don't even remember his name. He also went out like a chump, as you can kill him after only one counter. Also, none of the new stuff introduced in this game was ever brought back, which isn't a very good sign. The bomb crafting is interesting, but completely unnecessary outside of its introductory mission. The hook blade is kinda cool, but it makes me feel like I'm playing Ratchet & Clank instead of Assassin's Creed. But the worst new addition to this game is easily Tower Defense mode. You guys knew I was gonna say that. This becomes unbearable really fast. These defenses actively interfere with the pacing of the game, and they never stop. Let me say, it becomes really annoying that despite having an entire brotherhood of assassins in Istanbul, Ezio is the one who always has to come and save the day. It gets really old. Not to mention, despite this game being the clear push towards making Desmond the future of the Brotherhood, until AC3 screwed it all up, but we'll talk about that later, Desmond spends the entirety of this game in a coma talking to George Monroe, I mean Subject 16. This doesn't feel like a fitting continuation for Desmond considering his father had arrived by this point in the story, and after Brotherhood's cliffhanger, I was really expecting more and was really let down by the modern day in this game. However, the combat is still as fun as ever. Ezio playing a lute was something really funny I didn't know I needed in my life until I saw it, and his story as a whole is really good in this game. The scene where Altair dies before panning over to Ezio standing over his bones is one of the legitimately best scenes in the entire franchise. Ezio even acknowledges Desmond's presence, and it was such an emotional scene. Ezio definitely got the conclusion he deserved. I only wish it was in a better overall game. However, Altair's flashbacks and Ezio's conclusion saved this game from being any lower on this list. So at number 7 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed Rogue. Have you ever had a game that you know isn't the best, but you love to play it anyways? Well, that's Assassin's Creed Rogue in a nutshell for me. I know it isn't the best game, but it might actually be my personal favorite. Rogue is an extremely underrated game that has more to offer than meets the eye, at least pertaining to the plot and mythos. Gameplay-wise, this game is fairly, well, bland. They took the same setting from AC3 but downgraded the graphics. The biggest knock of this game was that it didn't have 100% of the developers' attention on it, as they were mostly busy working on AC Unity instead. This unfortunately allowed Rogue to get the short end of the stick in this case. The game is sadly only half as long as a normal Assassin's Creed game, clocking in at a mere 6 sequences. This really makes it hard to rank Rogue any higher even though I love it. It has subpar graphics and a story that's just way too short. However, it also has the smoothest sailing mechanics of any of the Assassin's Creed games in my opinion, as well as a really compelling story. Shay is the video game character that I feel the most like. I've had to make decisions in the past that affected my life forever, and I felt betrayed by people who I called my friends, so I was able to relate to Shay Cormac more than most of the other protagonists. This game also does a great job of showing some moral gray areas of the Assassin-Templar conflict, pointing out that the Assassins can be the bad guys and the Templars can be the good guys. Speaking of the Templars, we get to see more of Haytham Kenway, which is always a welcome sight. And this game provides the most underrated side character in Assassin's Creed history, Colonel George Monroe, a legitimately good Templar and person in general that always tried to do the right thing and gave Shay the direction that he sorely needed when he needed it the most. So yes, even though this game is wicked short and doesn't add too much to the series gameplay-wise, it's still my personal favorite game because of the moral complexity of the story. At number 6 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Now, I know. Rinzler, how could you put Brotherhood so low when you put it so high last time? Well, I'm sorry to say this, but I just don't like Brotherhood as much as I used to. Now, I will admit that Ezio is definitely in his prime with this game. Not too young, and he's not too old either. He's the perfect age. Not to mention, his combat is arguably the best in this game. I will also admit that Rome is my second favorite setting in the entire franchise, and doing the side missions, purchasing landmarks, liberating sections of the city, destroying Leonardo's inventions, and recruiting assassins feels incredibly gratifying. Also, Ezio has the coolest robes of any of the assassins in my opinion in this particular game, and the modern day story had really found its groove by this point too. My problem with this game lies in the fact that the actual story is fairly forgettable. The villain, Cesare Borgia, is pretty evil, but considering the moral complexity between the Assassins and Templars that the series has become known for, they make the Templars a little too evil in Ezio's games, especially this one. Besides the opening scene where the villa is destroyed and the ending scene of killing Cesare, I legitimately have to struggle to remember anything that happens in the main plot. The side missions are honestly better than the main plot, which is why I'm putting this down lower than last time. It's a genuinely fun game, but the plot holds it back from being in the top 5 for me. So at number 5 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed Unity. Oh my goodness, this is probably the most unexpected and surprising change compared to the last one on this list. But yes, I actually love Assassin's Creed Unity now. I used to hate this game with a passion, but upon replaying it a couple months ago, I realized I had a bad first experience, and this game is actually a lot better than I remember. The glitches are mostly non-existent now thanks to the numerous patches, although I do admit they spring up a little more frequently as more of Paris becomes open to you. But besides that, I love everything about this game, and I mean everything. The city of Paris is my absolute favorite setting in the entire series. It's so beautiful and full of life. It feels like an actual city, and it has actual realistic things going on in it. The parkour is smoother and better than any other game in the series, and the combat got a great update that requires a lot more skill to perfect, and thus adds more of a challenge to AC gamers who may or may not have become complacent by this point in the series because they've gotten so used to the controls. As for the story, people say that Arno is too much like Ezio, but I really don't see it. Arno's story definitely feels more like the moral complexity of its predecessor, AC Rogue, and that Arno is raised by an assassin but is then taken in by Templars when his father dies. Then he becomes an assassin himself and tries to help both groups make peace with each other. Of course, you know by this point in the series that Arno's dream of uniting the groups will never happen, but you can't help but admire how earnest he is in his mission. His relationship with Elise was something I also didn't care about last time, but now I really like. They have genuinely good chemistry, and Elise's death is seriously heartbreaking to me. After Arno loses himself to the bottle for about a year, Elise is the one to bring him back, but then she dies. It's really tragic, and it shows how love breaks the barrier between Assassin and Templar. Arno, an Assassin, is in love with Elise, a Templar, but neither of them care about their ideological differences. They just care about each other and keeping the city safe. That's what I love about Unity. Sure, the pacing can be a bit slow sometimes, the glitches still happen occasionally, and the modern day plot really sucks, but everything else in this game is wonderful. The advanced customization, the moral grayness of the story, the graphics, the setting, the combat, and the parkour make this a great Assassin's Creed game, and that is a hill I am willing to die on. My only sadness about Unity is that Arno never got to try and confront Shay for killing his father. In some alternate universe, fans got to see that dream fight in all its glory. Anyways, moving on. So at number 4 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed Origins. AC Origins was the breath of fresh air that Assassin's Creed sorely needed after 3's controversial ending, Rogue being badly marketed, Unity's launch disaster, and Syndicate releasing to almost no fanfare. Ubisoft wisely took a year off from making an Assassin's Creed game, and they came back with one of the best games in the series, AC Origins. While some were skeptical that they could make ancient Egypt an interesting setting to explore, Ubisoft ate those claims for breakfast and gave us a beautiful setting, filled with enjoyable side quests, a fun new leveling system, and our own personal eagle named Senu to catch great aerial footage with. The modern day is back in full swing too, with a playable main character named Layla, who is kinda boring, but who cares? At least we can actually play as somebody. Bayek, meanwhile, is definitely one of the best protagonists in all of Assassin's Creed, Having the genuinely heartbreaking origin story featuring the tragic death of his son and his subsequent murder quest, Origins feels like the best combination of Assassin's Creed, The Mummy, and Gladiator, and gives us the shot in the arm that this franchise needed desperately. The actual plot is an intricate mystery that starts off simple but becomes more complicated as we learn of more players on the board. So yes, this game has everything you could want. An excellent setting, fun side characters, a gripping story, a better modern day, and one of the most compelling protagonists in the entire series. Assassin's Creed Origins more than earns its spot this high on the list. So at number 3 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed 3. When people say that Assassin's Creed 3 is a bad game, I usually only agree on one aspect of their argument, and that's the ending. The ending of this game is one of the worst in video game history, and was definitely a huge letdown after Desmond was built up so well thanks to Altair and Ezio in Revelations. It was such a deflating conclusion to the modern day plot, and it set the modern day plot back for several games. But if you can ignore that elephant in the room, then AC3 is an extremely underrated and well-made Assassin's Creed game. Connor gets a lot of flack for supposedly being a soulless character who doesn't learn his lesson as the story goes on. However, I have to strongly disagree with that. I actually made an entire video about why Connor is underrated, so I won't go over it again here, but I would highly recommend watching that after this video is over. Shameless plugging. But besides Connor, this game also has Haytham Kenway, and Haytham Kenway makes everything better. I seriously mean that. He makes everything he's in better. It's almost sinful in my opinion that he never got his own game. It was such a missed opportunity. But he really makes his moments count in this game, as his 3 opening sequences provide one of the best twists in Assassin's Creed history when you find out he was a Templar the whole time, and his scenes with Connor later in the game offer not only useful insight to the Templar's perspective, but also provide much needed comedy relief, and are genuinely some of the funniest scenes in the entire franchise. On top of this, the combat in this game is most certainly the smoothest and most refined of all the games, and I have never had more fun fighting somebody than I did in this game. As for the setting, I know it's not going to be for everybody, but being from New England myself, I very much enjoyed the setting for not only providing me with an entertaining insight on my country's history, but also for giving me the homestead missions, which are extremely fun and remind me of rebuilding Roman Brotherhood. And sure, the sailing isn't as good as it would become later, but it was still a lot of fun for me, and it opened the series up to a myriad of possibilities. Not to mention, besides the ending, the modern day is actually really good in this game, as it allows you to actually go on missions in the modern day as Desmond. So yeah, the ending is the only real problem I have with this game, but I love the game so much as a whole that I'm willing to ignore it and put it up there with one of the very best in the series. At number 2 on my list, we have Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. What can I say about this game that hasn't already been said? It blew people's expectations out of the water, no pun intended, when it came out. Everybody thought the series was in deep trouble when the golden age of piracy was announced to be its setting, but it was unlike anything we'd seen in the series thus far. But that ended up actually being one of its greatest assets. It's so different compared to the games that came out before and after it that it provides a very fresh take on the established formula. Besides the setting, which looks remarkably beautiful considering that's a 7th generation game, this game also boasts the most complete collection of side characters in any of the games. All of them have their moment to shine and provide the setting with a very open and at times familial vibe. The sailing mechanics got a massive overhaul from 3's more rigid sailing, allowing it to become much smoother, which was a necessity considering that sailing is no longer optional. This game also has an abundance of fun side quests, such as the deep sea diving bells, the harpooning missions, the Templar hunts, and all of the various collectibles. Not to mention the satisfaction that you'll get when you build up the Jackdaw and turn it into the fiercest ship to ever sail the 7 seas. And if that wasn't enough, this story is also wonderful. Edward Kenway is easily one of the best protagonists, and the fact he never got a sequel feels like an actual insult. However, in his one game, he made the most of it, providing a morally complex character that's above the Assassin-Templar War and is simply trying to be a pirate and do his own thing. His transition from a pirate to an assassin wouldn't have been so smooth if not for Mary Reed, my personal favorite side character in all of Assassin's Creed. Her death was definitely the most emotional because she and Edward had just such great chemistry, and Edward's break from his normal carefree attitude is what tears are actually made from. The only thing holding this game back from being at number 1 is that the modern name in this game just isn't really good. With no Desmond, we really have to play as a faceless name as protagonist, and while that works for Half-Life, it really doesn't work in Assassin's Creed. If you can ignore the poor modern day though, Black Flag is easily one of the best AC games, and is definitely the best pirate game ever made. At number 1, we have Assassin's Creed 2. Of course it was going to be this game. It's probably always going to be this game. Assassin's Creed 2 is better than the first game in every way imaginable, providing us with a much more open and vibrant setting, a better combat system, an incredibly hooking story, an adventurous modern day, funny side characters, and the best protagonist in Assassin's Creed, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. What else can I say about this game? The pacing to Ezio being a cocky young upstart to being the victim of unbelievable tragedy to becoming one of the most gifted assassins of all time doesn't feel rushed in the slightest. You evolve right alongside Ezio as he goes from an irresponsible troublemaker to a fearless leader. Ezio easily has the best character arc in the entirety of Assassin's Creed, and if that wasn't enough, he also has great side characters to interact with, most famously Leonardo da Vinci, as well as some really great missions and an incredible ending. If I had to knock on this game at all, the combat isn't the best compared to today's standards, the graphics are a little less refined, and the Templars were still villains only. But besides those things, which really don't ruin AC2 in the slightest, Assassin's Creed 2 is hands down the greatest game in the series history and is one of the greatest video games, period. I dare Ubisoft to try and top themselves here. Safety and peace be upon you. May the Father of Understanding guide us. Whichever your preference, thank you so much for watching my re-ranking list, and I hope that what I've had to say encourages you to give the series the love that I know it deserves.